Hello and welcome to the SRA Specific Skills Series Mechanics Book F. You're probably familiar with my videos by now. If you're not, make sure you see the SRA Specific Skills introductory video to understand a little bit better about what this resource provides um, and how to kind of work through it. You always want to read the to the teacher, to the student pages. I will be stopping on the to the student page to go through the breakdown of the book, the overview, the outline that it gives you, the example that it provides. But by all means, I'm not going to read it word for word, so you're going to need to pause and read it on your own. There's not a lot there, but it's helpful for students if this is something that you're taking on your own, taking your own initiative and taking control or helping your mom or dad out because they're super busy with what they're doing, or they look too overwhelmed and you're wanting to kind of not burden them with any additional work, which is, if you are, I applaud you because that's very um, endearing to have someone who's willing to take this on their own. First things first, this is my disclaimer. This is for educational purposes only, so if you're printing this out, hopefully you're using this for your own personal use. I highly suggest if you are printing it out, use sheet protectors. First time around, you probably, even if you are going to be using sheet protectors and putting them into those and creating your own little resource book, I highly suggest all of these books are supposed to be done handwritten, because the only way you're really going to learn these skills is to build your working memory, because your working memory will um, filter into your long-term memory. So you want to be able to recall this information and make sure that you have a good solid foundation for when you get into college and into the workforce, because once you get into the workforce, these skill sets are going to be very helpful. If you can't structure an email or a professional corporate letter and letterhead, it's going to be a problem. Um, you have lots of time until then, so I'm pretty sure that even if that was something that you'd be concerned with, it's really going to be something that you don't have to worry about until a little bit later on. But the more work you do now, less work you have to do later on if you work the information to your advantage. So use the best strategy. Uh, Second, this is a perfect opportunity to make little booklets for yourself. Doesn't need to be notebook paper with just pen or pencil and just chugging away on eating up some of that notebook paper. You can utilize your creativity and use some construction paper. Like I was saying before, I've seen students make like little booklets with these, because the way this unit is broken down, the way the book is broken down, I should say, misspoke. At the beginning of the unit, at the top of the page, there's going to be a rule. You're going to hear me talk about that on the to the student page here in a second. But you can utilize that to build your foundation. You can use as a reference for later on. These are good to have, especially at the beginning of a school year, and you went through a whole summer doing nothing but nothing. So a whole lot of nothing can make you a little dull or a little bit slower at the beginning, because you're trying to, work your way into that new schedule at the beginning of every school year. So this is a great way to do a refresher, just kind of go through, work out your problems, go through the rules, give yourself a book maybe that you've read once before and see if you can utilize a passage or a paragraph from there, or a newspaper article or magazine article, and see if you can um, make the best of that. But there are resources online where you can actually look up paragraphs that need to be edited. So this would be in your writing component for mechanics, would be, this is something that an editor would do on something that needs to be polished before it's going to be published. But once I get past the to the student page, this is the answer key is at the very end, so you can choose to print that out if you need to make sure that you have the right answers. The answers are going to be based on the letter I didn't say this in my previous videos because since this, F is related to the grade, so this would be a 6th grade book, I would assume that if you see multiple choice questions, that the answer key is going to utilize the letter. So make sure when you're writing your answers down, you're writing the answer itself, but put the letter next to it as well so that you can identify that. If you're on notebook paper, I tell students to utilize the left-hand margin to write the letter of the answer that they're choosing. So then you can just utilize the margin to check your answers. Okay, and we are off. This is to the student page. As I mentioned before, this is an important page, not just for the teacher or parent who is looking through this with this COVID-19 thing going on. I want to make sure that I've provided as much information as possible. So if I seem like I'm talking too much or I'm rambling, you can keep moving forward. You can just move that little slider around. As I was saying, it has the rules at the beginning of every unit with following questions that you're supposed to go back and look at the example provided within the rules to help you answer the questions. This is not once you write down the rule or look at it one time, you're supposed to go through 1 through 20 questions and be able to master that information just like that. No, you do the first couple, and I've said this before on other videos I've done. But this especially is important for my middle schoolers. Make sure that you're doing the first 2 questions with them so that they understand that the sequence of answering the question. So you're going to write down the notes. You're going to read the question. You're going to look back at the notes and see what they're looking for, what you can associate, and make your selection. If they get it wrong, explain why it's wrong. If it is good, if it's correct, and they get the correct answer, let them do the second question on their own. And if they have no questions, keep moving on. Just wait until they come up with a question. There are going to be things that are going to be mentioned that may or may not be a problem. If your kid knows what a VCR is, bravo, you have officially introduced them to the 80s technology, and I'm proud of you. But they don't know when they're doing these abbreviations. They might mention something that is out of date. Yes, this is a little bit older of a resource, but it's still language building skills. They don't really change. Not language building, but your reading and writing skills. So these are the skills that your kid's going to need for writing, but also in reading. So here we have the overview of this book. There's a total of 12 units for Book F. There are not 12 subjects, so that means that each of these units are going to be broken down into smaller pieces to make sure they don't overwhelm the student. So here it says colons, semicolons, and hyphens. It looks like a lot, but when you go through it, I'm fairly certain you'll see they just want to differentiate between those 3 particular punctuations and identify when to properly use them. So the challenge is making sure that your student understands the rules behind that. Simple enough. And if they're combining them together and this is a 6th grade book, chances are it's not going to be too complicated. It's going to be at the level they need to be. This can be done for middle schoolers, high schoolers, and I've said in previous videos before, I have used these books for SAT and ACT prep students because this helps with reacquainting them with the terminology used in language building. So present participle, past participle, you don't know what that is, and they mention it in one of the writing components for the language part of the ACT or SAT. You're going to have a hard time answering that correctly, and wasting time is time not well spent. There are some examples here that give you an idea of how they're going to present the information or utilize it when in an example and help to understand what's going on. And of course, at the very bottom, just like in your student's classroom, teachers are required to put the learning goal or the learning objective. This is the learning goal and the learning objective of the entire book. This is what should be accomplished. After a few units, they have language activity pages, so that helps to create that rigor and also show how to apply application, and also recognizing, so since it's the mechanics, you're going to come across paragraphs, so they're going to have to, in the language activity pages, they're going to need to, in all of these language SRA specific skills books, the language activity pages, one of the sections, they have a paragraph or particular writing thing, and they have to either identify, you know, which part of it's wrong or right. So that helps to generate reading in context. So utilizing context clues, but also applying the rules within a normal reading environment. Because I don't know if you've seen a language arts textbook or not. When they talk about simple subject or complete subject, simple predicate, complete predicate, things, lessons in regards to that, they actually take a paragraph and break it down into sentences. So, like, they'll be reading a whole paragraph and not realize it. I've gone through so many lessons. I'm like, so did you like the story? And they're like, I did not even know I was reading a story. I'm like, yeah, this is a paragraph. If you took the numbers away and indented the first sentence, this is a complete paragraph. So letting them know that they can take something, a bigger chunk of literature or a piece of writing, and break it down into smaller pieces is going to allow them the opportunity to say, you know what, it looked overwhelming, and you may feel a little overwhelmed if you're a parent looking at this and hearing me talk and you're like, oh my goodness, this is, just move on, let me see what's going on, I want to know what I'm getting myself into. Just letting you know, you can take this lesson outside of this book, especially for the middle schoolers. Use a book that they're already reading, or encourage them to read a book. In these books, they mention other books. So since they know this is a sixth grader at least minimum, utilizing this book, they're going to present reading material that are of that grade level. So this would be a great resource to introduce some of those books, articles, stories, poems, whatever it is that they're suggesting, and take the lesson further. So you can move it up, turn it up a notch, and get them acquainted with some of that. Or if you want to read it on your own, just to be, as a parent, you just want to know what the material is about and if you think it's appropriate, and before introducing it, that will help with reinforcing that particular skill as well. But you can take an article or whatever and try to, from a magazine or the newspaper, and see if this is something that you can apply there in those particular instances. So if you see if you read an article or something, and there's a misprint, or if you want to have them um, extend a sentence, or add an abbreviation to something, or if there is a comma and you want them to get rid of the comma, how do you do that? So you can, depending on, if you have multiple kids, and they're obviously going to be different ages unless you have twins, triplets, or whatever, but as you can increase the rigor with just this one book, and even this mechanics C, D, and E, even before this, they have this particular setup. They're all set up the same way, so you can extend that, and you can also minimize it as well. So instead of them having like quotation marks, I don't believe they go over that in book C for like a third grader, right? So if they're going to be going over quotation marks here, they're not going to have it in book C, but you can introduce quotation marks to your child or to your student if they're advanced enough. So if they go through book C and they are just ridiculously, they're getting everything right, or they're not as challenged, they understand those rules, they're good readers, so they understand how these work, then you can move them up to the next level. It's you get to change the temperature of where you want your student to be and build them up. I always say start the student out where they are or below that. Most of the times it's more important to start below because then you really get to see where the gaps are. And then as you start to fill the gaps, you start to see the confidence. And then the foundation is settled into something a little bit more sturdy. All right, I've done enough chit chatting. Here I go, 5 to 6 seconds per page. You won't hear me talk until the answer key. Alright, that is the end of that book, and I'm going to show the answer key. I'm going to zoom in just so you can get like the multiple choice ones, and then I will spend the time on the laps because they have written words as part of their answers. And it does go in chronological order by page and by unit. As you can see, unit 1, 2, 3, so it goes column to column. And then there's 9. Alright, I'm going to zoom in for the first lap. Got the answers for that right here. And then for the second lap, it's up here. And then the third lap and the last lap are both visible at the same time. So let me condense that back down. And that is the end of this video. Take the time to watch the introductory video for the SRA specific skills if you have not already. And you can check this out on YouTube, KC Kite 1. I'll have other specific skills on there as well.